Detroit's vast abandoned Packard factory. Can one of the dirtiest US presidential contests ever resolve America's economic conflict between prosperity and poverty? Good evening from the biggest abandoned factory in the world, all 3,500,000 square feet of it. The wreckage here speaks to the wreckage of American politics. This presidential election is not reaching the voters with bold plans for renewal, but with bitter, highly personal dogfights in which reports of sexual abuse, foul language and more are traded with allegations of Clinton's abuse of classified documents and calls for her criminal prosecution. The FBI has stirred the pot, as have the Democrats themselves, alleging that they have been told that a secret intelligence briefing has warned of Trump's too close relationship with the Russians. We're live tonight across the United States.
I'm in Ohio, where Hillary Clinton has just left the stage after negotiating some FBI-related turbulence. She is pushing back. But the president has just called the director of the FBI a man of integrity. High drama in this low and mean election.
And I'm 1,000 miles south in a scorching Dallas, Texas, where they've been voting early in record numbers, such as the passion and anger generated by this election. As for the Trump campaign, well, they've been given a much-needed fuel injection by the FBI.
And here in Detroit, whose economic woes have been so redeemed by music, we'll be talking to the Motown legend, Martha Reeves.
Also on tonight's programme, no inquiry of any sort into the Battle of Orgreave. Campaigners who'd been led to expect one denounced the government's decision as a shameful establishment whitewash. Emily has struggled for 6 years to get a job. Now the government says it wants to make it easier for others with disabilities to find work by rooting out prejudice across society. But has the government itself been making matters worse? We speak to the minister. And the UKIP leadership contender who set out his stall in the pub calls time on his campaign just 3 days later after anger over his misogynist insults.
So, the FBI's renewed probe into Hillary Clinton's use of a private email server while she was Secretary of State has exploded a political hand grenade into this presidential race. She's now urging voters to ignore what she calls the noise and distraction of the campaign, leaving it to her Democratic Party allies to attack the FBI director for his 11th-hour intervention. And all the while, a fired-up Donald Trump is making the most of this last-minute momentum. We'll be hearing from his camp in a moment. But first, Kylie Morris is in Kent, Ohio, where Hillary Clinton has just addressed her latest campaign rally. Kylie, did she mention the emails?
Well, yes, John, Hillary Clinton is no stranger to having her back against the wall, but I've got to say she is at her best when she is on the defensive, and she is on the defensive now. She walked out here only moments ago. The first thing out of the gate was addressing the issue of the emails. There is no getting around this. It exists, even though the Democrats are doing their best job at trying to diminish James Comey's judgment, the FBI director, and trying to make arguments about her having dealt with this before. She dealt with this 6 months ago. The FBI have never found anything to pursue her on. There's never been any criminal charges. That's the message that they want her to deliver. But at the same time, she needs to, in a way, push emails out of the way and come back to reminding voters about the issues that will make them go and cast a vote for her. This is what she said, though, when she first began on the emails.
Now they apparently want to look at emails of one of my staffers, and by all means, they should look at them. And I am sure they will reach the same conclusion they did when they looked at my emails for the last year. There is no case here.
She went on to talk about other things, of course, certainly about the national security threat that she judges to be posed by Donald Trump. As for Donald Trump, he is very much making the most of this at every campaign stop. In these last final frenzied days, he will be reminding people about the reasons that he says they should not trust, voters should not trust Hillary Clinton. From Colorado to New Mexico, Donald Trump can't stop talking about them.
Now the FBI has found 650,000 emails. They found a lot of emails that were never given. Hillary should have been convicted long ago.
The FBI is now embroiled in this low and mean election, with splits within the Justice Department itself over whether Director James Comey has done the right thing. He's a hero to the Trump campaign, a disgrace to the Democrats. Their Senate leader, Harry Reid, accuses him of unfairly targeting Clinton without taking aim at Trump's links to Russia. In a letter to the director, he accuses Comey of breaking the law by weighing in. It ends,
I led the fight to get you confirmed because I believed you to be a principled public servant. With the deepest regret, I now see that I was wrong.
patchy Wi-Fi on the campaign plane meant Hillary Clinton on Friday was one of the last in America to learn her emails were back in the news.
Secretary Clinton, any reaction to the FBI investigation? Have you been in touch with the FBI, Secretary Clinton?
Vice President Joe Biden discovered how the emails were found and their link to a disgraced former Democratic congressman in a TV interview.
But I don't know where these emails came from. What?
Apparently Anthony Weiner.
Well, oh God, oh. Anthony Weiner. I should not comment on Anthony Weiner. I'm not a big fan.
It was the FBI's investigation into Anthony Weiner allegedly sexting a teenage girl that turned up the new emails on a laptop he shared with his wife, Huma Abedin, who is Hillary Clinton's closest aide. The FBI only now has a warrant to see the emails, which means Director Comey acted before he knew their contents.
It's pretty strange to put something like that out with such little information right before an election.
While the candidate casts suspicion, her running mate is telling voters the whole issue is just a distraction.
Nobody's going to be distracted, right? No. I tell you this, Hillary is not distracted.
22 million Americans have already voted. For those casting ballots early in Akron, Ohio, there was little evidence the latest email episode has made a difference. You've just voted for Hillary.
Yes.
Did the email issue give you any pause for thought?
No. It's like I'm so over that.
Okay.
They beat that to death.
Emails, we all get in trouble with emails. I've canned my boss a couple of times, so, I mean, it's no great big deal.
What Hillary has done is criminal.
For Republican voter Jeff Van Ness, it is a big deal, but it only confirms what he already thought.
Very true, and there's probably more that we don't know yet.
Every week people say it can't get stupider, and every week it gets stupider. So that's, I think, the problem.
Many are relieved that this policy-light, scandal-heavy campaign is nearly over. The divides it's exposed pose a massive challenge to whoever wins. So Hillary Clinton has just left the stage here. She was here kind of trying to enthuse some voters and certainly trying to remind them not to be distracted by emails. But she has a problem here in Ohio. She was already trailing, even before this additional email story broke, a couple of points only behind Donald Trump. As you heard from the voters who we met this morning, certainly for Democrats, they don't seem particularly perturbed. But the problem is she's not reaching out to any new voters here, and she really needs that to win this critical swing state.
And welcome back to the Packard factory on the outskirts of Detroit, Michigan. Let's join our spy on the sky for a moment. It's absolutely staggering, the scale of this place. Just imagine that in 1911, people had the vision that they were going to build a place of this size, that it was going to build enough cars to make it worthwhile and to perhaps sustain a factory for a century. It actually only lasted until the 50s. But it's a staggering place, amazing, and a great sort of testament to American endeavor and perhaps foolhardiness. But I'm joined now by Brandon Dillon. He's chair of the Michigan Democratic Party. First of all, your state is a critical state. It's a swing state.
That's right.
How are you feeling about that?
Well, we feel good, but we're not taking it for granted. Michigan has been a state that's gone for Democratic candidates since 1988, but Donald Trump is making a push here, and we're pushing back just as hard.
To what extent is the froth, as one might describe it, which is, after all, dominant in this campaign, interfering with your work?
Well, I think it's been dominant over the entire campaign. It's been a long campaign. People are fatigued, but we're trying to make sure that we cut through the noise and talk about issues that people actually care about, jobs, the economy, the environment. But you're right, it has been an ugly campaign, and we've got a lot of work to do to make sure that people understand that there's actually hope at the end of this.
Can you tell locally what sort of impact the FBI's move on Mrs. Clinton's emails?
Yeah, I think actually it's energized the Democratic base. I think for a while people thought maybe this race was over, that Hillary Clinton was going to cruise to victory, and now they understand that the stakes are very high and are going to do everything they can to get out and cut through that noise and go right to the polls.
Now, Donald Trump wants to bring car making back, but even bigger than it still is here in Detroit. Is that a realistic promise?
Well, Donald Trump has also said that workers in Michigan make too much money, and that his plans for bringing back the auto industry in the United States are to move jobs out of Michigan. So we know very well what Donald Trump stands for, and it's not bringing jobs back to America. It's actually making things in China and Turkey and the other places that he's chosen to set up his factories.
But Mrs. Clinton talks about £250 billion worth of dollars, in your case, sorry, dollars worth of investment in infrastructure, which presumably would bring jobs here.
Well, it would. We've got an infrastructure crisis, not just in Michigan, but across the country. We've got aging road systems, we've got aging underground infrastructure, and that kind of public investment is something that's actually needed. And Hillary Clinton's talking about that while Donald Trump is talking about whatever it is he's talking about this day, but it's not about actual plans to improve the economy.
But it's a sad reflection that it's rather than making products, it's going to be making infrastructure, which doesn't in the end produce.
Well, you do have to have good infrastructure to move goods and products from point A to point B, and it's one of the problems we've had attracting investment in some places. The state of our roads, the state of our bridges has made it difficult for people to make that choice, and we want them to see that we have a good plan for them.
And in a word, your guess as to the outcome of this awful struggle?
Hillary Clinton wins.
I guess you would have said that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Brandon Dillon. Well, within the last hour, Donald Trump has been speaking just down the road from here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And he's again blamed the political establishment for the social and economic problems of the state.
The political class in Washington has betrayed you. They've uprooted your jobs, your communities, and they've shipped your wealth all over the world, to Mexico and all over. They put new skyscrapers up in Beijing while your factories in Michigan were crumbling. These were our politicians.
Donald Trump sees the FBI announcement as justification for his repeated jibes about crooked Hillary, and the tone of his recent campaigning has become, if anything, even more hostile. Matt Fry has been following the Trump bandwagon through New Hampshire and talking to some of the supporters about the levels of hatred aimed at his opponent. And be warned, his report does contain some offensive language.
There's nothing quite like a Trump rally, and there never has been. The technology may be digital, but the mood hails from the dark ages.
Thank you very much.
Hillary is Trump's most powerful campaign weapon, just as he is hers. Hating Hillary, locking her up, is rallying cry, dress code, and in the case of Mavis, it has replaced knitting. What have you done here?
We made a voodoo doll of Hillary.
That's a voodoo doll.
Yeah, something you stick pins in and wish bad luck on.
You stuck pins in her eye?
Yeah, we did, yeah.
That's not very nice.
I loved it.
The pins seem to be working. Hillary is slipping in the polls in this Halloween election disfigured by gargoyles, demons, and blood-curdling pieties.
In the name of Jesus, we pray.
Before the hate, there's always the faith, the nod to God.
We pray that you guide the hearts and minds of the people of our nation as we prepare to go to the polls.
If you please, turn and face the rear wall. You'll see the large American flag there.
The pledge to the Stars and Stripes, America's other religion.
Join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
The stage is set for the impresario of anger.
She lied to Congress. She lied to the FBI.
After the FBI dropped its bombshell, Trump smelled blood and the crowd victory.
And they are reopening the case into her criminal and illegal conduct that threatens the security of the United States of America.
Lock her up. The chorus at every Trump rally, climax and warm-up. This one yesterday in Las Vegas.
The peasants, the serfs, and the taxpayers with pitchforks, jackhammers, and blowtorches are headed for Washington, D.C. Can you hear us? Lock her up! Lock her up! Lock her up! Lock her up!
And then there are other ugly voices, more at home at a Klan rally, aimed at Trump's other favourite enemy, the metropolitan media. The campaign has condemned this anti-Semitic bile, but bottling rage is their meat and potatoes, and at every rally in every state, Hillary is the focus. There were a lot of people here tonight shouting, lock her up, as in Hillary. Were you one of them?
I want her to face a fair trial in court based on the charges that are being pursued against her, but also based on all the evidence without half of it being subdued by the FBI due to political considerations.
What would you do if the polls are correct and Hillary Clinton wins on the 8th of November?
I will be disgusted, pissed off at the world, thinking that we're going to go through 4 more years of scandals, investigations, and destruction of our military. It'll be a disgrace.
Some people have talked about a revolution if he loses.
That could happen. It could happen. I'm not ready to go there. I have grandchildren and stuff, but no, I'm not going to be violent. I won't be violent.
And the fact that this even needs to be said illustrates the state of American democracy this year. A mixture of melodrama, farce and tragedy, with the no votes world watching nervously.
Well, Matt has moved on to Texas and joins us now from a polling station in Dallas. And some people are taking a chance to register their votes early, Matt.
Some people, John, thousands of people, 58,000 people, and that was yesterday, so probably even higher now, have voted early here in Dallas County. Across America, as Kylie told us, it's 22 million. Why are they doing this? Well, because they want to be organized, they're passionate about getting their vote in. And I think this does probably play well for the Democrats, who have a much more efficient electoral machine, get out the vote machine, than the Republicans do. But let me just first of all dwell on the rhetoric in this campaign for a little bit. I mean, what both sides are doing essentially is talking about the other side in a kind of mutual assured destruction of politics. So Hillary talks mainly about how Trump is just for the presidency. He talks about how she should really be in jail. And that is really a first, I think, in any election campaign that I've covered in this country. And of course, it doesn't bode well for the future, because what happens if she is elected president and she's under criminal investigation? What happens if he's elected president and half the country doesn't accept it? So I think America is in a deep-rooted democratic crisis about this vote. And that's why the president came out today and said, would neither condemn nor defend the FBI. This is very important, because what is being eroded here is the credibility and the neutrality of crucial institutions of the state. And that's why this FBI business is so serious on so many different levels. Back to you, John.
Well, a little earlier I spoke to Lena Epstein, not here, but in the center of Detroit. She is the co-chair of the Trump campaign here in the state of Michigan. And I asked her about some of the language that her candidate is using, particularly about Mrs. Clinton.
There have been plenty of times that I have been very concerned about Mr. Trump's language, but I wouldn't want him to be my kindergarten school teacher. I wouldn't want him to be my Sunday school teacher, but I would certainly want him to be my president. I have never favored Mr. Trump for being eloquent or always saying what feels and sounds right. I think he speaks the truth and sometimes cuts to the heart of issues, and it can be hard to hear at times. He's gotten in trouble more than once for saying something inappropriate, and never once have I apologized for that. But I do believe that when he is able, and we as a country focus on the issues that he presents, he is the candidate of choice for the American people.
But it's a rare thing to have a candidate who's already convicted his opponent and jailed her effectively.
Well, it's all rhetoric, it's all words, it's all We don't know if in fact that would be the case. I believe that's really the process of the FBI.
But what does it do to the people who hear it? Don't you think it stirs them up into a kind of fervor that they can't necessarily channel anywhere?
I can speak for the Republican Party was thrilled to hear him say that.
There was a rally last night in which people shouted anti-Semitic, horrible anti-Semitic
My husband showed it
statements.
to me, and we are both Jewish, and we were very deeply affected by that. And one person's representation does not speak for an entire campaign.
Except that others joined in, which was very nasty.
It is very nasty. And unfortunately, this world that we are in has been highlighted by such divisiveness and polarity and anger and hate on both sides that it's very easy to look at the comments of one. And I could point to a Hillary Clinton fan and some terribly inappropriate things said. It just speaks to how much we as a nation and as friendly nations need to rebuild going into November 9th, November 10th, and beyond.
He has said some terrible things and done some awful things. Are you comfortable with that? That the President of the United States of America, half of whose people are women, should have a man like that at the top of it?
I was very uncomfortable when Bill Clinton behaved the way that he did. I was equally uncomfortable when I learned of what Mr. Trump had said. As far as doing, it all remains an allegation. So let's be clear.
No, it's much more what he said as well.
Let's be very clear. It is an allegation of what was done, but what he said was not okay. And I have been meticulously clear in interview after interview after interview that I will never apologize for him, that I think that it was wrong. He needed to apologize, and he did. And I believe that he handled it with dignity and with grace.
Lena Epstein, thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you for the honor of meeting with you.
You don't get that very often, but more from here later, including a chat with the legendary Motown singer Martha Reeves. But now, back to Kathy in London for the rest of the day's news.
Thanks, John. Now, an establishment stitch-up. That was Labour's verdict on today's announcement by the Home Secretary that there would be no inquiry into clashes between South Yorkshire Police and striking miners at Orgreave in 1984. The last Home Secretary, one Theresa May, had invited campaigners to submit their case for an inquiry, but her successor, Amber Rudd, told MPs today that having considered the arguments, she felt there was no justification to follow the example of the Hillsborough inquiry. Our senior Home Affairs correspondent, Simon Israel, reports.
There was expectation they would get something after years of campaigning. But in the end, the Home Secretary decreed there were no more lessons to be learned 32 years on from Orgreave.
I have concluded that there is no case for either a statutory inquiry or an independent review.
We've just worked so hard for 4 years now and driven this to the top of the political agenda. And it is just so deeply disappointing not to get anything at all.
The 18th of June 1984 was a day few in South Yorkshire can ever forget.
The first cavalry charge came a few minutes later, and it clearly worried the pickets.
The battle for the coking plant became the symbol for the miners' resistance. Campaigners argue they have never had a proper account of what took place. But the government today argued, unlike Hillsborough, there were no deaths, no wrongful convictions, and therefore no need.
Aren't we right in concluding that the establishment stitch-up that she has just announced today is nothing more than a nakedly political act?
No, the Right Honourable Gentleman is entirely wrong.
But it's the campaigners who feel they've been wronged and misled.
Get in there and see what they're doing.
And that what happened in these scenes was a travesty of justice.
Mounted police went in, scattering the pickets right across the field.
Well, I personally am absolutely devastated and dismayed. I cannot believe it. Deeply shocked, because this was not what we were expecting at all, and it's not what the people of South Yorkshire, I think, deserve.
There are now plans to open up the South Yorkshire Police Archives. Some feel there's an urgent need for public confidence to be restored in a force under siege from the fallout of Hillsborough, Rotherham grooming and the Cliff Richard case. But today, there was no lifeline from the government.
Simon Israel reporting there. Now, prejudice and misunderstandings which stop disabled people getting work have to end. That was the message from ministers as they published their Health and Work Green Paper. They want early treatment to help and encourage those affected to get into work. But as Kamian Zeram reports, the government is itself accused of stoking intolerance in the past by cutting benefits for disabled people.
Emily Davison finally has a job. She's been looking for 6 years. The stress and confusion has been exhausting. As well as a visual impairment, she has a complex gene disorder, which means her mobility and energy levels change by the day. And add to that, the potential prospect of a much criticised benefit test, a work capability assessment.
It's trying to have to explain to people my condition and how it affects me, and that is extremely stressful because I think to an extent you can be made to feel like you're fabricating it, or that it's not as severe as it sounds.
Charities today gave cautious welcome to government plans to reform the system in a Work and Health Green Paper, with proposed changes not just to work capability assessments, but also how health and social care can affect getting disabled people into jobs.
More disabled people are in work, 500,000 more than just 3 years ago. That's encouraging, but we need to build on that progress and do more to help disabled people reach their full potential. It's clear that for many disabled people, the barriers to entering work are still too high.
But this government is under fire for its recent changes to the benefit system, and today's announcement marks a softening of tone. The Secretaries of State for Work and Pensions and Health, plus the Disability Minister, today visiting a firm who actively support staff with their access needs, like publisher Mark Russell. He has a visual impairment, but magnification software means he can get on with his work just like everyone else.
Changing attitudes is never easy, and it's a longer term project, I guess.
But if there's one thing that many want ended straight away, it's the work capability assessment.
So many of my friends and colleagues and people that I've met with disabilities have had to go through this system, and they've been put under so much stress and concern because they fear that it's going to impact on their life and they're not going to be able to support themselves, or then they're not going to get the right support that they need.
Emily started her job last month. It's part-time, just what she wanted, but it has been a long, long time coming.
Well, a little earlier, I spoke to the Minister for Disabled People, Penny Mordaunt. I began by asking her if the government might scrap the controversial work capability assessment altogether.
We're looking at fundamental reforms, yes. I think that we're always going to have some kind of assessment process. We need to make sure that people are accessing the right type of benefits, and we need to also ensure that people are getting the right kind of support. So there's going to have to be some process to that. But I think the work capability assessment has not done the job it needs to do. It's not giving us the support that's built around that individual. It's not tailored to them enough.
You say you'll need some kind of assessment still in place, but isn't the truth that this culture of reassessing disabled people endlessly, it was supposed to save money, it hasn't, and actually what it has done is caused untold pain and misery to many, many disabled people?
Well, I think that one of the things we want to do is to look at actually how we cut down the amount of hoops people have to jump through to get support.
The government's benefit cuts have been described as cruel. The former Secretary of State resigned over another tranche of cuts. He's calling on the government to reverse the latest cuts to universal credit. Is that something that you would urge the Chancellor to consider?
Well, what we need to do is ensure that people are getting the support that they need. We're not going to unpick previous decisions, but what we have said is that there will be no more cuts to welfare.
When you don't have your work and pensions hat on, you're obviously one of the leading pro-Brexit ministers. Are you getting the Brexit that you wanted?
I think so. I mean, I was obviously campaigning for the UK to leave, and I did so because I have absolute faith in our country. I think businesses are choosing to stay here.
But some businesses are potentially only choosing to stay, like Nissan, for example, because they've got sweeteners promised by the government.
No, I don't think that is the case. We have these conversations with business all the time. It's quite right that we provide confidence to those industries to remain in the UK.
Penny Mordaunt, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Another candidate has withdrawn from the race to be UKIP leader. Raheem Kassam ended his campaign just 3 days after it began, blaming the top of the party for treating the contest like a coronation. His withdrawal means there are now 4 candidates in contention. Nominations close today, and the result is due at the end of November. And just to warn you, this report from our political correspondent Michael Crick does contain flash photography from the start.
Of the Faragists, I am the Faragist.
It was only on Friday that Raheem Kassam formally launched his campaign in a pub, presenting himself as son of Farage. But he's been dogged by questions about scores of offensive tweets he's sent over the last few months, many too abusive to show in full.
Aren't these the tweets of a drunken lout rather than somebody who aspires to be leader of the opposition, as you were just saying now? Were you drunk when you wrote any of these?
No, I wasn't.
As nominations to replace Nigel Farage close today, 4 names are on the ballot, with the result in 4 weeks' time.
Today really is a great day for our party. No doubt we've had some challenging times over the last couple of months. Now we've got some really good, thorough candidates that want to move this party forward, that have vision.
None of them are going to pull out?
I'm hopeful that they are committed.
Entirely confident?
I am entirely confident.
So why did Kassam quit? Some friends say he's seen a chance in the US, where his pal and former boss Steve Bannon now runs Donald Trump's campaign. Tonight, we caught up with Kassam, back at the Westminster Arms.
So, Mr. Kassam?
Yes.
Why have you pulled out? What's the real reason?
Well, I took a view this weekend that the competition wasn't a fair fight. The party was treating it like a coronation, and I wasn't.
Coronation for whom? Paul Nuttall?
Yeah, I think so.
You think they're trying to fix it for Mr. Nuttall?
I don't know about fix, but the entire party machine is being used in his favour. And, you know, I like Paul, he's a good guy, but the election's not a fair fight.
Some people say, some of your friends say that you really seen an opportunity across the Atlantic. Donald Trump could be about to win the American presidency. You want to get over there and get a job with him?
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't had any talks with them.
But your friend Mr. Bannon is running the Trump campaign.
Yeah, look, you know, that would be a good thing if it happened, but you know, I've not inquired about that. You know.
Kassam says he'll fly to Washington tomorrow to do his US radio show, he says, not to help the Trump campaign. Michael Crick, Channel 4 News, Westminster.
Welcome back to the extraordinary remains of this Packard factory here in Detroit. It's a scene of economic devastation. But hold a moment. This decay is not the whole story. This place died in the 50s as a car maker. It struggled on with small industries within and finally disintegrated altogether in the 90s. But look at the inspiring skyline of the city of Detroit itself. It's a unique story of invention, creation, and bust. It's a place that cries out for forces that will support its determination for renewal, as I've been finding out. Detroit is a complex mashup of wealth, poverty, and production. Production of cars and of music, principally Motown, not least Martha Reeves, a queen of Motown, singing in the Ford Mustang plant in the 1960s. Detroit is indeed the industrial weather vane of America. When times are booming, this city is part of it. But when recession bites, Detroit was, and still is, shattered. Here, lingering evidence of economic devastation in the 1950s. An oil shock or a market slump, and Detroit's cars just don't sell. If Motown depicted Detroit on the up, techno was born when it was down. These are the studios of Underground Resistance, who ship techno music with its mechanical sounds on vinyl all over the world.
Detroit techno reflected then, still does, what was going on.
Yeah.
It was futuristic, it was music that reflected discrimination,
economic decay,
all that kind of stuff, all rolled up in one. Even through the bad times, there was always hope that things would get better, and they are. So Companies are moving in, people are moving in from everywhere.
So the signs for now are of better times. But despite continued major car production boosted by President Obama's bailout of the industry 6 years ago, small car production has gone south to Mexico. That's why Detroit is in the eye of this year's campaign storm. Trump wants those jobs back. He wants import tariffs to keep manufacturing jobs in America and a wall to keep Mexicans out.
When we abandoned the policy of America first, we started rebuilding other countries instead of our own. The skyscrapers went up in Beijing and many other cities around the world, while the factories and neighborhoods crumbled right here in Detroit.
A new reality is to be found in a rehabilitated downtown building.
And they go on to, we call this cell marriage, where the front panel and the back panel are put together.
Welcome to Detroit Denim, one of a myriad small-scale, highly skilled startups in this city that seek to beat out imports and provide for the high-end clothing market. Are you a symbol of Detroit's recovery?
I think we're perhaps one facet in a very multifaceted gem of Detroit's recovery. There are so many things that are going on in Detroit. Everyone feels a sense of responsibility. We're definitely a part of it, but I wouldn't say we're the one symbol. We're a part of it.
Obama got the U.S. economy moving. Detroit is not going to desert the Democrats. But this state of Michigan, in which the city sits, is one Trump thinks he can win. Mrs. Clinton is still just in the lead here, but is so far not winning all the votes she could. How does that leave you now then? Do you vote or not?
Of course I vote. I'm voting. I mean, I think that you know, if you don't vote, it's a vote for Donald Trump. You can vote for anybody you want, but I'm supporting Hillary Clinton.
I hate career politicians for one. Two, I hate. And hate is a strong word. I despise Donald Trump. I mean, I totally despise him. But I know it has nothing to do with my music because it's, you know, once if Hillary come in office and then she fucks up with the trade and I can't ship my records to distributors in Europe, I have issues.
Well, we're joined now by Martha Reeves, who has lived in Detroit since she was a baby. She came to fame, of course, with her backing group, the Vandellas, recording such Motown hits as Jimmy Mack and Dancing in the Street. But she's also dabbled in politics for several years, serving as a councilwoman here in the city. So that little whiff of politics, what did it tell you about what you're feeling now? I mean, what about this contest that's going on? It's a bit grubby, isn't it?
Well, it's a new thing to have a woman actually be the first to be in politics and get to the point where she has. And I just love America, and I think that it needs a grandmother to heal it. I think this election has been the most hilarious thing that's ever been presented to the public by the press, and I'm looking to see that it happens all at the steps of the White House. I'll be there with a circle of singers singing on election night to see how the outcome is.
The very fact that a woman is within a heartbeat of the White House, that's really been obliterated by this awful sort of name calling and the rest of it, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's more playing the dozens as we used to as children, talking about each other's mother, and we called it scoring. They've been doing some talking about each other more than the politics or more than the issues of the world, and I'd like to see it come down to the issues of the world.
Now, if you were going to tell anybody what city in Britain Detroit might be compared with, what would you say?
Well, Dave Garden came over to America from the Tamla Motown Appreciation Society and told us to come to England. One of our first stops was Liverpool, and it looked very much like Detroit to me. I felt very much at home.
Well, that's fantastic. And, of course, both cities have finally come up.
Flourish, yes.
And Detroit is coming up, would you agree?
It's already up. It's
up.
Just a few places like where we're standing that we'll have renovated and cleared up in a matter of years. And it's a wonderful city. We've got 3 major casinos here with 4 5-star hotels. We've got a Compute Center downtown. Dan Gilbert is here. We've got a wonderful, wonderful lot of development being done in the city.
And you've got music. Why does such an industrial clank, clank, clank town produce Motown?
Well, Berry Gordy worked at the Ford Motor Company as part of his career finding. As an entrepreneur, he decided he'd rather be a producer of music because music soothes the world. But Detroit is known for its motor city, its motor cars, and its music, the Motown music.
Now, if Mrs. Clinton becomes president, will you be really proud of her, or will you have misgivings about emails and heaven knows what else may have been said about her?
When Madam Clinton becomes our president, I'll be especially proud because she has what it takes.
What is it that it takes?
The experience. She's been a first lady. She'll be the first lady.
Martha Reeves, you're magic. Thank you very much indeed for coming here and giving us a little sprinkling of Motown stardust.
Thank you.
Well, after the break, how do you solve a problem like Detroit? We talked to two people with different plans for revitalizing the city, about their visions and who might be better to deliver them. Welcome back to the abandoned Packard plant in Detroit. We'll have more from here in this extraordinary arena outside Detroit in a moment. But first, we're going to go to Syria, where there's been very heavy fighting continuing around the besieged city of Aleppo. Rebel fighters have launched an offensive in the west of the city, aiming to break the siege. But there are reports that the Syrian government's Russian allies are preparing a full-scale military assault launched from an aircraft carrier in the eastern Mediterranean. Krishnan is in Damascus, where he's been speaking to the Syrian foreign minister.
Foreign Minister, if the rebels decide to stay and fight in Aleppo, it is your intention to retake it by force and to kill them, yes?
Without doubt. How they decide to stay, if they are unarmed, this is one question. If they are armed and they decide to stay, this means we need to fight them.
It'll be a bloodbath.
They choose this. We have another option to them to tell us that they are going to leave anywhere they want and we will secure their security.
There will be inevitably massive civilian casualties if that happens, won't there?
No, I can't say mass civilian casualty. You need to ask the citizens in East Aleppo if they are staying there by their will or they are obliged to stay there.
But you believe they are hostages, don't you? You don't believe they're staying by their own will. So, but you will kill many of them if you have to retake eastern Aleppo by force.
If they are not armed, why we need to kill them?
Well, I mean, if the militants are fighting you, the civilians who live alongside there, and they are the vast majority, they will be killed, won't they?
Well, as I said, we offer a 3 days truce for them. And we secure passages from the east to west. Why they did not allow them to go?
How do you think the casualties in East Aleppo balance against the casualties in West Aleppo?
Well, in the West Aleppo, it is more than 100 times more than in East Aleppo.
People have seen many images from East Aleppo that appear to show hospitals having been hit, schools having been hit, civilian casualties in horrifying numbers. What is your view of these videos? Do you say these are all made up?
You are from TV and you know how to make them up.
So you do think they're all false?
Yes, because we never shelled civilian. We are aiming only armed group.
But perhaps they get hit by accident. I mean, that always happens in war, doesn't it?
Why you want to prove this happened? By putting some suggestion. We are trying to avoid this.
When do you think this will be finished? When do you think Aleppo will be in your hands?
When they are surrendered or decide to leave East Aleppo or be killed.
Just finally, Donald Trump seems to be very much singing your tune. He says it's more important to remove ISIS than it is to remove President Assad. Do you see him as a more favorable option than Hillary Clinton?
Well, first of all, I'm not going to be part of the American election. The American people will choose whoever they want. President Assad is the Syrian people choice. It is not the American president choice or anybody choice. It is the Syrian people's choice. Whenever the Syrian people believe that he is not suitable for the position, they will say.
Now, we've heard from the politicians, so let's hear from two people who are doing their bit to revive and revitalize this city. Cara Smith is a Michigan-born architectural historian. Her grandfather worked as a steel buyer for the Packard Motor Company in this very building, and she is now Director of Development for the plant. And Sebastian Jackson is the founder of the Social Club Grooming Company, a multicultural barbershop, bringing men and women together across racial lines. Well, let's start with you because, I mean, you actually have a familial link with this extraordinary place. I mean, doesn't it make you question what on earth they thought they were doing, building it in 1911?
It does. But the surprising thing about the Packard is the way that it was built. So this complex was the first industrial structure to use the Kanbar system, which was then used to build skyscrapers around the world. So it's because of how strong it was built in the beginning that it's able to remain throughout blight and abandonment for so many years.
It's still not fallen down yet.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
And, of course, Detroit was a city with appalling riots in the early 70s.
Yes.
Would you say that race relations are sealed, or it's still a struggle to come?
I believe it's still a struggle, especially from some of the metropolitan cities. It's going to be important for us to create as many places as possible, physical places that can bring people together through, food and different culture, restaurant, music, so on and so forth.
So this presidential campaign, does it speak to you?
Absolutely. I think we see two different, candidates, two very different candidates. One that wants to continue with these divides, and one that wants to bring people together. I think it's very clear, who's for what type of America.
And to you?
I absolutely agree. I think these two candidates will make a huge difference in the way that America pulls forward. I think Detroit, being the city with such a history of racial tensions, really needs a president that is going to go above and beyond and bring the people of America together again. And that's very important to me as a Detroiter, the race relations being less tense and more of a togetherness.
So in a sense, in rejecting Trump, it shines a spotlight on Mrs. Clinton. Couldn't it be argued that she's of the old order, that, she's been in power in one way or another for 40 years? Isn't it time for a change?
Well, I think she's done amazing things. She has battled a lot of problems that are in America. I think as president, she'll be able to really make some decisive actions. I don't think she had the upper hand in every single decision that was made. And I definitely think between the two candidates, she's far more superior in what I define as my America than Donald Trump.
What about the email business?
Well, they'll try to pull out whatever they can. It doesn't really concern me as much as the rhetoric from Donald Trump.
But it looks awful, doesn't it?
It's unfortunate.
Lack of transparency.
It's unfortunate, definitely.
And I think, more than Trump being an issue, I think Trump's followers are a huge issue, because these are followers that, are actually acting out on what he's talking about. And I think, they're held even less accountable than a presidential candidate, right? He's saying things that are, ridiculous, but he still has some type of reserve because he has to, right? But his following doesn't have to, and we have to interact with them every single day in our barbershops, in our clothing stores, in our restaurants, and that could be dangerous if they have kind of a ringleader rallying them up all the time.
That is the huge worry, what happens after this election, even if he loses.
Yes. Yes.
And you will then be left with a rump of people who voted for some very extreme statements.
Yes.
It's a bit scary, but it's going to be up to us, that I think are of sound mind, so to speak, to continue to push forward, right? And I think one way we can do that is through business.
Let me ask you a pointed question. Who would get this plant built more quickly? A successful businessman or a politician?
The question isn't who's going to get it built quicker. The question is, if an entrepreneur like myself actually gets the contract, will I get paid, right? Will I be treated fairly? And I think we've seen things that have shown that that won't happen.
Well, you're the architectural historian.
Yes.
It will take something to get this rebuilt, and they are going to rebuild it in some way.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. We have 4 phases right now. It'll be a mixed-use development. Our first phase will be the former administrative offices of Packard Motor Car Company.
You mean I will come back here in, say, 3 years' time?
Yes, and you will see, yes, 1 or 2 buildings completely done and 2 that are being worked on. It's a 10 to 15-year project. It's the largest renovation project in North America and one of the largest in the world. It will take time, but we're going to do it right, and we're going to do it properly, and we're going to provide many, many jobs through this development for the Lower East Side and for Detroiters.
Well, I think you both speak for the decency of America in the face of some difficulties, we could say. Thank you both very, very much for coming.
Thank you.
Now, we'll be back tomorrow at 7, but for now, that is Channel 4 News from all of us in the United States and from Kathy in London. Have a great evening. That's Channel 4 News.